Hello, and welcome to an introduction to the Competing Values Framework. My name is Richard, and I am the Chief Systems Developer for Online Talent Manager, a psychological test distributor based in the Netherlands. So let's start in the beginning. Throughout the 20th century, companies were looking for the silver bullet. How can I be the best company? Lots of models, lots of theories were put forth. But in 1983, John Rohrbaugh and Robert Quinn took all these models and put them together into a single comprehensive framework. And they also looked at individual companies and did some research into what was making them successful. And what came out of the research was that all companies are in the middle of performing two separate balancing acts. The first deals with focus. Are they focused on the inside, internal focus, or are they focused on the outside, and external focus? And the second balancing act deals with stability. Are they looking more for control, or are they looking more for flexibility? Now, when I put these two balancing acts together, that gives us four kinds of an organizational culture. Now, Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron created a short survey questionnaire and some explanations of the different kinds of corporate cultures that these four areas represented. In the top right-hand side, I see the intersection between an external focus and a focus on flexibility. And we call that kind of culture an adhocracy. An adhocracy culture is focused on being open and innovative, generating new ideas, putting things together in unusual ways, creating synergy. In the bottom right-hand side, I see a company that's externally focused and looking to control. And we call this a market-oriented company. And in a market-oriented company, they're really focused on the bottom line. They're focused on competition. They're looking at the market. They're looking at what their clients want, and they're really focused on making money. In the bottom left, I see the intersection between an internal focused, a company that's paying more attention to what's going on inside their doors, and control. And here is where you find a company that's really focused on procedures and documentation, creating order, quality, hierarchies, and that's what we call it. We call it a hierarchy. And in the top left, we see a kind of culture that's focused on the inside and on flexibility, and we call this a family culture because they're focused more on personal growth, cooperation. You can see it as an organization that cares about the people. Now that they're all in a single graph, you can see how the cultures on opposite sides of the graph are competing with each other. For instance, if I look in the top right and bottom left, I see adhocracy and hierarchy. Now, if I'm an adhocracy, I'm focused on new ideas and creating things and thinking outside the box, and those are diametrically opposed to what's the focus of a hierarchy. A hierarchy is focused on order and incremental improvement. I like what Jeff DeGraff once said. He said, the best way to kill creativity and new ideas is to put a procedure around it. I think that's very apt. So these two drives are pulling in different directions. They're competing with each other. And you see that on the other axis as well. In the top left-hand side, I'm focused on the family and making sure people are happy. And in the bottom right, I don't care about the people on the inside. I'm focused on the market. I'm here to make some money and be competitive. And those two things are clashing with each other. But the truth is that an organization must be competent in all of these areas in order to be successful. A company might lean in one direction or another, but all of these things need to be done. You can innovate the most amazing products, but if you can't bring them to market, if you can't make them dependably, or if you can't keep employees from quitting immediately, then that organization will fail. So this model is a good way of explaining, in a nutshell, organizational culture, but it also can be used to describe communication styles and management styles, but it's not quite fine-grained enough for dealing with individual work styles. So in 1989, somewhere in there, the early 90s, Robert Quinn wrote a book called Becoming a Master Manager. He was looking at using the competing values framework to describe how a manager should operate. And he was seeing the perfect manager is someone who's covering all the bases in a good way. All we've talked about so far, when we're looking at an organization or we're looking at an individual, is we're talking about how people behave, how a company behaves, how you act. Do you remember the iceberg model that I talked about in the last presentation? Well, behavior is just the tip of the iceberg. There's all that stuff under the water that we need to think about. So in the late 90s, Bert Goos and Andre Choa were really enamored with Quinn's model. They looked at becoming a master manager. They looked at the model and the behaviors described, and they said, that's awesome. We should use that ourselves. And since we're really good at test developing, what we can do is we can look for the personality factors that are driving those behaviors. And so they wrote the octogram test. And the octogram test is the only psychometrically valid test for this model, and it's been proven over the last 12 years by testing over 100,000 candidates. And since the octogram is looking at behaviors, we can communicate a lot of different things through this model. We can communicate work styles and organizational culture and communication and management styles and personality through the lens of the competing values framework, so you can see how all of these personality factors influence real-life behavior in the workplace. The next series of videos is looking at individual tests and describing what they measure and how you should interpret the results. But in all of these cases, the results are translated into the competing values framework, so you can see how these sometimes esoteric things that we're measuring actually influence real-life behavior in the workplace. Thank you for your attention.